They looked like the perfect family. Church every Sunday. 12 well-behaved kids. But behind closed doors, something was terribly wrong.
One son believed the CIA was spying on him. Another killed the family dog, convinced that it was possessed.
Tension built in ways no one could explain, and the strange events inside their home would later horrify doctors, investigators, and the entire country.
Eventually, one of the boys murdered his own girlfriend and then took his own life. And the most interesting part was that the world never knew because the Galvins didn't talk about it.
What unfolded there didn't just break a family. It challenged everything Americans thought they understood about the human mind. The perfect family that hid a storm. Donald and Mimi had 12 children, and they were known for their strong involvement in their church and their deep friendships within the military community in Colorado Springs. Their children took part in many activities that brought admiration from neighbors. The boys played hockey, wrestling, and football with a level of skill that earned respect. They also practiced falconry, which is the training of birds of prey, and this rare hobby made them seem disciplined, adventurous, and well-guided. Families who lived nearby viewed them as a living example of what a successful and respectable American household looked like. But inside the house, the truth felt very different. The boys often fought with each other, and the fights were not small disagreements. Many of these fights were intense, loud, and frightening for anyone who witnessed them. Their father ran the home with strict rules and very firm expectations. He treated the house like a military base, and he referred to his children by numbers instead of calling them by their names. This created a cold atmosphere in the home, and many of the children felt like they were more like soldiers than sons and daughters. Their mother cared deeply about the image of the family, and she wanted the world to see them as strong and united. She put more focus on keeping up appearances than on looking closely at the growing problems inside the house. No one around them understood how much pressure was building within the family. Even inside the home, many of the children did not fully understand what was happening to them or to each other. The family had become used to tension and noise and harsh discipline, and they believed it was normal. The foundation of the family was becoming unstable and fragile, but the warning signs did not seem clear to the outside world. Most of the neighbors saw only the bright image that the family presented, and they did not imagine anything troubling behind it. But what lived behind that image was a growing combination of fear, confusion, and painful silence. Some of the children felt unsafe at times, but no one knew how to speak about it. Others felt overwhelmed by the constant effort to behave perfectly in front of the community. Everyone in the house tried to play the part of the good family, even when the pressure became too heavy. As time passed, a sense of dread began to settle into the home. This dread came from moments that felt strange or out of place. These moments included sudden outbursts, sudden changes in behavior, or long stretches of worry that no one could fully explain. But the first clear sign that something serious was happening came when the oldest son, Donald Jr., began to lose his grip on reality. The golden boy who became the first warning. Donald Jr. had always been the son the family showed to prove everything was fine. He was handsome, athletic, and accomplished. He excelled at sports and people admired him wherever he went. He dated the daughter of an Air Force general. The relationship impressed neighbors and friends alike. Everyone expected him to have a bright and successful future. On the surface, he seemed to embody the perfect image of a Galvan child. But even in high school, Donald Jr. felt something that no one around him could see. He sensed a distance from the rest of the world, a strange separation from everyone he knew. It was as if an invisible wall kept him apart from friends, family, and even his own brothers and sisters. At first it was small and almost unnoticeable, but over time the wall grew stronger and more dangerous. The feeling of being cut off from reality began to shape his thoughts and actions in ways that frightened him and those around him. When he went to college, the changes in Donald Jr. became impossible to ignore. His behavior grew increasingly unpredictable and alarming. Without explanation, he would run into bonfires as if he could not feel the danger. He once harmed a cat, an act that terrified his siblings. On another occasion, he poured salt into the family aquarium, killing all the fish and leaving the home in shock and disbelief. At home, he would move every piece of furniture into the yard and smashed dishes one by one at the kitchen sink. His parents were bewildered and tried to downplay the events, hoping they could be ignored or controlled. His siblings, however, were terrified of the sudden violence and strange behavior that seemed to come from nowhere. The situation reached a terrifying climax when Donald Jr. tried to take his girlfriend's life. He attempted to force her to inhale cyanide fumes in the home. After this horrifying event, Donald Jr. was diagnosed with schizophrenia, a severe mental illness that affects a person's perception of reality, often causing delusions, hallucinations, and dangerous behavior. He was taken to a state hospital for treatment. At first, the family hoped that this would be the end of their nightmare and that Donald Jr.'s collapse was an isolated tragedy. But instead it became the first link in a chain that none of the Galvins could escape. The second breakdown and the horrifying secret no one wanted to face. James was the second oldest son, and for many years he appeared steady and dependable. He had a job, a wife, and a young son who adored him. To the younger brothers, he felt like a safe harbor during a time when their home was filled with tension and confusion. They believed he was calm and easy to talk to. He joked with them and made them feel that at least one older brother could be counted on when things became stressful. However, inside himself, James was fighting a growing struggle that no one else could see. He began hearing voices that spoke to him when no one else was in the room. He felt as though people were studying him closely, even when they were strangers who had done nothing unusual. He believed that others were planning harmful things against him. These worries filled his mind and left him unable to rest. He tried to quiet these thoughts by drinking heavily. He hoped that alcohol would give him a sense of calm and help him feel normal again. Instead, it made his fears stronger and caused his behavior to become more unpredictable. His marriage slowly fell apart. He began to lose the gentle and playful nature that his siblings admired. The family watched this change with rising concern, but they did not yet understand the full truth of what was happening inside him. As James continued to struggle, he carried a secret that added another painful layer to the family's turmoil. During a time when his two younger sisters, Margaret and Mary, were already frightened by all the chaos in their home, James took away their innocence, leaving them both hurt and scared for life. It took years before the truth came to light. When it finally did, the family was consumed by shock, pain, and disbelief. They had believed that James was the brother who could be relied upon, yet he had caused deep emotional harm during a time when his sisters needed protection. The heartbreak became even heavier when the family learned that James's own innocence had been taken away as a child by a priest whom the parents had trusted completely. They believed the priest to be a safe and respected figure who cared about the spiritual well-being of their children. Discovering that he had taken advantage of James created a devastating realization. It forced the family to understand that the emotional wounds inside the household were deeper than they had ever imagined. James was eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia. This diagnosis explained the voices, the paranoia, and the fear that had taken control of him. It also explained the sudden anger and unpredictable behavior that had frightened the family. Although the diagnosis brought clarity, it came after much damage had already been done. His actions and his struggles became another reason why people outside the family would one day see the Galvins as America's most disturbed family. James passed away in 2001 due to complications from his medication. His death added another heavy layer of sorrow to a family that had already lived through so much. His parents and siblings mourned him deeply. The house felt heavier after his passing, filled with both grief and lingering questions about what might have happened if he had received help earlier. And while the family was still processing the loss of James, they began to face another crisis that grew even more frightening. The murder-suicide that shattered hope. After watching two older brothers lose control of their lives, the younger Galvins placed much of their hope on Brian, who was the fourth son in the family. Brian seemed bright and full of promise. He was talented in many areas, and he had a friendly personality that drew people toward him. He loved music and proved to be skilled at singing and playing instruments. He traveled across the state with other musicians and gained a small following. Later, he moved to California to chase his dreams, and his family felt proud of his courage. To the Galvins, Brian represented a sense of relief during a painful time. When they looked at him, they believed that not all their sons were destined to fall into the same struggles that had consumed Donald Jr. and James. He felt like proof that the family still had a chance at normalcy and hope. But unfortunately, Brian carried his own worries inside him. He did not want the family to see him as weak. He did not want anyone to look at him with fear or pity. None of his siblings knew that he had been given antipsychotic medication, which is medicine used to ease symptoms related to severe confusion, fear, or detachment from reality. He tried to manage the changes in his mind without asking anyone for help. For a period of time, it seemed as though he could control it. His music, friendships, and busy lifestyle helped him stay distracted, and the family believed he was thriving. But everything fell apart in 1973. During a moment of overwhelming confusion and emotional turmoil, Brian caused harm to his girlfriend Nan in a way that ended her life. Soon after this tragic act, Brian ended his own life as well. The family could not make sense of the news. Their first instinct was to tell themselves that it must have been an accident. They hoped that some detail had been misunderstood. They wanted to believe that Brian had simply faced a moment of terrible misjudgment rather than a deeper crisis. However, the truth became clearer with time and could not be denied. Brian had been living with the same kind of illness that had already taken hold of Donald Jr. and James. Brian's death deeply affected the younger siblings. They were old enough to understand what had happened, and the shock left them with heavy fear. Many of them began to wonder if they would face the same fate. They questioned their own minds. They asked themselves if the illness was hidden inside them, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The worry settled over them and made ordinary daily life feel unstable. Their fears were not without reason. Another wave of emotional collapse was already building inside the family, even before they realized it. A house engulfed as more sons begin to fall. After Brian passed away, the illness that had already harmed several of the older brothers began to move through the younger Galvin sons with a force that felt impossible to stop. Each new episode arrived with very little warning, and each one pushed the family further into fear, confusion, and disbelief. Peter, who was the youngest brother, experienced his first severe episode after he witnessed his father suffer a stroke. The shock of that moment left him deeply shaken. Before this, he had been known as a thoughtful and intelligent boy who enjoyed mathematics and played hockey with skill and enthusiasm. But everything changed after the stroke. Peter became frightened by things that others could not see. He believed that something evil lived beneath their house, and this fear took control of his thoughts. He moved from one treatment to another. Doctors tried different medications. Peter even received a treatment known as electroconvulsive therapy, which uses controlled electrical stimulation to help calm severe symptoms. Some of these treatments helped for a short time, but the relief never lasted long enough. Peter's fears always returned, leaving him exhausted and heartbroken. Joseph had once been a promising hockey player in Chicago and had looked forward to a bright career. People admired him for his strength and discipline, but without warning, he began to behave in ways that alarmed those around him. He once sent threatening messages to his supervisor. Soon after this, Joseph became convinced that he had lived in ancient China. These beliefs did not come and go. They became fixed in his mind and caused him deep distress. Unlike some of his brothers, Joseph understood that something was wrong inside him. This awareness brought its own kind of suffering because he knew that his life was changing in ways he could not control. Joseph spent the rest of his life in psychiatric care. Matthew also began to show alarming signs. In one episode, he removed all his clothing inside a stranger's living room, which caused confusion and fear for everyone involved. He later smashed his own handmade pottery and insisted that he was the famous musician Paul McCartney. These beliefs grew stronger over time. The family saw that he could not return to independent living. He eventually reached a point where he required full-time nursing care, and this situation continued for the rest of his life. And while these three brothers battled their minds, the remaining brothers who did not show symptoms faced emotional pain of their own. They lived with what is often called survivor guilt, which is a painful mix of sadness, fear, and confusion that comes from being spared when others are not. They watched their brothers struggle and wondered why they remained unaffected. Each new diagnosis tightened the tension in the family. They tried to stay strong, but the worry never left them. They knew that the pattern in their home was too strong to ignore. Many believed that it was only a matter of time before more brothers lost control. As the years passed, the family gained a reputation that no one would ever want. People outside the home began to talk about their situation as something extraordinary and frightening. The combination of widespread illness, unpredictable behavior, and repeated tragedy led some to view the Galvins as one of the most disturbed families in the country. But even these tragedies were only part of the story. Because while the brothers suffered, the sisters were enduring their own silent nightmare. The sisters who survived the chaos. Margaret and Mary were the only girls in a house filled with 10 brothers. 6 of these brothers slowly lost touch with reality. Growing up in this environment shaped the girls in ways that most people could not imagine. Their childhood was not filled with ordinary moments of play or carefree laughter. It was shaped by a constant awareness of danger inside their own home. The girls woke up every day unsure of what would happen next. They often hid in locked rooms while their brothers moved through the house in frightening episodes that neither parent was able to control. They listened to shouting, crashing sounds, and sudden bursts of anger that left them terrified. Margaret and Mary learned to stay very quiet and to avoid drawing attention to themselves. They understood that speaking up could make the situation worse. They learned skills for survival at an age when most girls learned simple childhood lessons. Part of their fear came from the actions of James during a time when they were already overwhelmed and unsure of their safety. He took advantage of their trust and left them with emotional wounds that were very difficult to talk about. These moments affected them for many years. The girls carried the pain with them in silence. They believed that no one would understand what they had experienced, and they also believed that drawing attention to the events in their home might upset the fragile balance that kept the family from falling apart. As they grew older, both sisters sought ways to escape the home so that they could finally breathe without fear. Mary earned a scholarship to a boarding school. This opportunity allowed her to leave the house behind for the first time in her life. She changed her name to Lindsay because she wanted distance from the memories that haunted her. Margaret, on her own part, left the home as soon as she was able to live independently. Leaving gave her a sense of relief, but she also carried a deep sadness about the family she had left behind. Even though they finally gained freedom from the home that had caused them so much distress, neither sister turned her back on the family. They returned as adults with a stronger sense of themselves and a desire to help the brothers who were still struggling. They stepped in when their mother and father became older and overwhelmed. They helped manage appointments, spoke with doctors, and worked to keep each brother safe. Their presence became a source of calm and structure. As they spent more time learning about their family's medical history, Margaret and Mary realized that their story held important clues about a complex illness that had taken so much from them. They reached out to researchers who were studying mental health. They provided detailed accounts of their childhood experiences. They collected medical records, treatment notes, and personal memories from each brother. They offered researchers an inside view of the patterns that had shaped their family. And with their help, science finally uncovered the genetic mystery that explained why the Galvins had suffered so deeply. The discovery that explained everything. For many decades, doctors believed that schizophrenia developed because of poor guidance from mothers. This idea placed enormous guilt on parents and caused deep confusion for families like the Galvins. Mothers were blamed for something that they had no control over, and fathers were often left wondering why their families were suffering. The belief caused shame and silence in households where children were already struggling. Families felt responsible for an illness that they did not create. The Galvins carried this emotional burden for years. Over the years, a small group of researchers began to question this old idea. Among them were Dr. Lynn DeLisi and Dr. Robert Friedman. These researchers believed that the true cause of schizophrenia was biological rather than emotional. They were convinced that the answers lived inside the body and the brain rather than in the behavior of parents. They did not blame families for the illness, and they believed that scientific investigation could uncover the real source. Over many years, they collected blood samples from the Galvin family. They stored medical records, tracked symptoms, and watched the brothers closely. Their goal was to give science enough information to reveal what had harmed the family. Then, in 2016, a breakthrough finally arrived. Scientists discovered a rare change in a gene called SHANK2. This change appeared in all 6 brothers who had developed the illness. It also appeared in their mother, Mimi. This gene is involved in the communication system between brain cells. When the system is disrupted, the brain struggles to process information clearly. The finding offered one of the clearest biological explanations that researchers had ever seen for schizophrenia. It showed that the illness had begun inside the body of each brother long before any symptoms appeared. It also showed that the illness was not caused by parenting. Mary and Margaret carried the same genetic change. However, they developed depression rather than schizophrenia. This difference raised important questions about the role of gender in mental illness and about the ways in which stress, environment, and biology interact. It suggested that men and women might respond differently to the same genetic influence. Researchers began to wonder whether outside pressures, early experiences, or hormonal factors might shape the way the illness appears. The discoveries encouraged a deeper understanding of how complex the illness truly is. The Galvin family became one of the most important case studies in the history of mental health research. Scientists learned from their experiences in a way that no laboratory or controlled study could ever achieve. Their story helped move the field forward with a stronger sense of clarity and compassion. However, these answers arrived too late for many of the brothers. By the time researchers identified the genetic cause, their lives had been shaped entirely by the illness. Their childhood dreams, their early talents, and their adult futures had been taken from them. Today, only 2 of the brothers remain alive, and both live in nursing homes where they receive full care and supervision. The sisters continue to look after them through a family trust. They speak publicly about mental health so that other families can avoid the pain that they endured. They fight for better treatment, earlier diagnosis, and more understanding from the medical community. The story of the Galvins remains one of the most heartbreaking and unforgettable family histories in modern America. It is a story filled with illness, emotional turmoil, trauma, courage, and scientific discovery. It shows how a single family endured suffering that few can imagine, and how their willingness to share their experience helped change the world's understanding of a devastating disorder. It explains why many people eventually came to know them as the most disturbed family in America. What do you think about the Galvin's family mystery? Comment down below.